Last spring, Mayor Davis created a committee to study the city's charter and to make recommendations for changes. Our charter is more than 100 years old, and some parts of it are quite antiquated and don't serve the city well. The committee came up with 5 recommendations on very short notice, and the committee will continue its work later. 2 principal recommendations that we're making are on the November ballot. And one of those is Measure Q, which relates to Section 186 of the Charter. Section 186 of the Charter determines the salaries for public safety, for police and fire, through a method of comparing San Bernardino to what are called comparable cities. That's comparable cities in terms of population. So they look at 10 different cities in California that have populations between 100,000 and 250,000 and say that they're comparable to San Bernardino. The difficulty with that is that in virtually all other measures besides population, these cities usually aren't comparable to San Bernardino in terms of their economies, their tax bases, their income levels. For example, in 2011, the cities used to compare in that comparison structure had median family incomes from $47,000 to $87,000. San Bernardino's median household income was less than $40,000. The way they use that information is that for particular police and fire positions, they look at the exact average that those 10 cities are paying for that particular position. And whatever that average is, that's what we have to pay in San Bernardino. It doesn't make any difference whether or not we can afford it as well. It's just the formula stipulating that. A difficulty for us then is that it's almost impossible for our city council to effectively manage the budget. Public safety, police and fire takes up well more than half of the total budget, and the city council has absolutely no control over that because Section 186 says how salaries have to be determined. All right. As a result, other important services that people value typically are underfunded. So, parks and rec, libraries, street maintenance, variety of other services. You drive around town and you see that many of those services are less than adequate. But the way that the charter is written, it automatically funnels most of the funding in the budget to police and fire. We need to change that, right? Measure Q would change the way that salaries are determined and to use collective bargaining instead of the automatic formulas associated with what other cities pay. What we would do would use what every other city in California does to determine police and fire salaries, collective bargaining. We're the only city in California that does not use collective bargaining to determine the salaries of police and fire. And also, all of the other employees in the city of San Bernardino, for city of San Bernardino government, besides police and fire, they have their compensation determined by collective bargaining. So this is not a recommendation to do something that nobody else is doing. The way we're currently doing it is what nobody else is doing. And the problem is that that compensation for police and fire accounts for much more than half of the total budget, and therefore our city council, whose basic job is to manage the budget, finds itself with having absolutely no control over more than half of the budget. We need to have control over that ourselves. But that's the way every other city does it. Every other city council can manage their entire budget. That's what we need to be able to do. Section 186 has made it almost impossible for the city council to manage the budget effectively because it has so little control over the budget. The people of San Bernardino, as taxpayers, as citizens, we deserve to have a city council that can manage the entire budget and figure out the best way to allocate resources to effectively provide services to the citizenry.